Okay, welcome once again. Hi, everyone. I'm Yakov Horowitz, and this is called Purim Parenting, Q&A, and it's really designed for you to have an opportunity to ask, any questions, whatever's on your mind about Purim, mostly geared towards, I would love to discuss Divrei Torah with you, but I assume that's not why anybody's on. It's more about real life questions about Purim, about drinking, about supervising your children, finding the balance somehow between having them have a fabulous time and at the same time being supervised and safe. Okay, so I'm going to just start with just a short presentation, and then I'll take your questions. I did get some questions from some of you in advance. I'll try to get to some of those, and let's just go. So the first thing I really would encourage you to do before I get to the specific questions is take an overall assessment. And that is, where's your relationship with your tween or teen? Do you have an open relationship? Are you comfortable talking to each other? Would that child share something with you if you didn't know about it? Are they the type? Are they compliant? Are they a rule follower or a rule breaker? Are they just naturally inclined? Are they a contrarian personality? What are the other people in the neighborhood doing? What's the drinking level? Is the school that you send your child to a place where they have a no drinking policy, where they have a dry party? Or is it, unfortunately, quite the opposite of that, and it's just very freewheeling? So all of this is part of an assessment that I encourage you to do, and that's why, of course, my philosophy is always to give you the tools to make these decisions yourself, rather than kind of the blanket answer, tell you not to drink, or don't let the for yourself, for your child, for your family situation, how your relationship with them is. So again, all of these factor in, and as we get to your questions, I'm sure that will come up. That's something that's very important. This talk is dedicated by my dear friends Michael and Estelle Stein, who've been trustees of Project Yes for over 20 years, and who's always been encouraging me, and always still encourages me to do much more of this. I wrote 3 questions. Should you ban alcohol or encourage them to be careful? Should you purchase alcohol for your house and see to it that the kids, do it in front of you? Or should you not give them the message that, your house is a drinking place? And how do you respond to the question of everyone's doing it? So again, I'm only going to touch upon this briefly because I'd like to get to your questions. That's what this is all about. And so briefly, it's a philosophy, whether you say ban or encourage. For the record, Dr. Abraham Twersky, Olav Shalom Zecher Tzadik Livracha, who was very kind to mentor me for many, many years, felt that parents shouldn't have any alcohol at home at all. I don't have to tell you how much respect I had for him. I didn't understand, my philosophy and the way we raised our children and the way I understand things nowadays. I told him, I said, Rabbi Shia, I don't understand how you could do this. But out of respect for him, I always start off by saying that first. And with humility, I'll just tell you what I did. And I think the question is, again, what happens if you say no? If your children are the type that they're compliant and you say, we don't do alcohol here and that's it, obviously feel free to do as your heart suggests and think is wise. If your child is a rule breaker and you know that they're going to be out drinking, I think you're much better off having it at home with supervision, even if it means that you have to go out and purchase whatever the children like. I got a few emails today, parents asking me that kids gave them a list of what they wanted at home, and they wanted to know if that's right or wrong. So again, it's a personal decision. All of those variables are very important and come into play. As for everyone else is doing it, that's not a small thing. Now, it's certainly fair and optimal if you can just say, listen, we do things differently at home. But as I said, it's a personal decision. It depends on how you're doing things. And it depends on always, what happens if I say no? What happens if I say no? Will they listen, or will they just go out and do it elsewhere? If they're doing it elsewhere, I would suggest that, what are you really accomplishing if they're going to go ahead and do it, behind your back? So one last thing before I take your questions, I just want to talk about the general issue of alcohol consumption, why people are concerned about it, why it's not just like whatever, they're just having they had a rough year this year, which they all did. And, let them free and let them have some fun. Come on, don't be Horowitz, don't be such an ogre. So the backstory is that there's a great deal of research on teen drinking. The original great body of research was done by the Center for Alcohol and Substance Abuse. You can look it up yourself, CASA. And one of the striking things about teen drinking and smoking, or any of basically getting involved in substances, is that the research shows that the later parents can push this off for, the more likely it is that your kid's not going to pick up a habit. There's a direct correlation. If children, for example, if you can postpone the time that your child is drinking until 21, let's say, ideally, the research shows that very few people, a small percentage of people, start at that later age. So besides for the fact that you're postponing it to a time where they, hopefully will be more mature and make more rational decisions, physiologically, you're postponing it to a time where the frontal cortex that controls executive function, which we know and research shows is not fully developed in adolescence. So they're more likely to make responsible choices if you push this off to a later date. And the fact of the matter is, they're far less likely to take this up. Besides for that, separate and aside for that, alcohol and tobacco are considered, the experts refer to it as gateway drugs. And the concept of gateway drugs means that very few people take cocaine or anything else that's a hardcore drug substance without going to one of the gateway drugs. Gateway is a portal to go to the next step. So it's almost unheard of that kids will go directly to hard, substance abuse without passing through this. So essentially, worded differently, allowing your children access to alcohol when they're young dramatically increases the likelihood that chas v'shalom they're going to move on to the next drugs. Whereas if you can protect them from smoking, if you can protect them from drinking, especially at a younger age, but even later, it certainly helps them in terms of their long-term prognosis. So for those two reasons, each of them valid in and of themselves, it's certainly wise to do what you can to postpone it. I'm going to be posting, I have, this list, I've been posting a lot of material on my social media for the last couple of days. But one of the things, hopefully I'll pull an email list together from you folks who are here and send you some links. One of the links is an extraordinary interview that I did with Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky about 15 years ago. And I asked them specifically the question, how about drinking on Purim? And the mitzvah of Abdullah Yada, that it says you should drink, Chayiv V'nishal B'sumi, the Gemara says you're obligated, quote unquote, to B'sumi, to get drunk, till you don't know the difference between Haman and Mordechai. And Rav Shmuel said, Chas v'shalom, it's a sin to get drunk, it's an avera to get drunk. He meant roaring drunk, not taking, a little alcohol. And he said it's an avera to say that it's a mitzvah. It's a sin to say that it's a positive commandment to do so. He was very, very strong about it. He also interpreted, he says, chas v'shalom, why the Torah would never say something that adala yada literally means that you should get stone drunk where you don't know the difference between, red light and green light. So Rabbi said, Rav Shmuel said that it says chayiv inish l'besumei. We know from Havdalah we have the word besamim. Besamim means a smell. So he says chayiv inish. Rabbi Kamenetsky interpreted, Shmuel interpreted the words l'besumei like a besamim, to take a little whiff of it. You should take a little whiff of alcohol. And this that it says that you don't know the difference between Arar Haman and Baruch Mordechai. So Rabbi said, Rav Shmuel said that what that refers to is that you sing a song, Arar Haman, Baruch Mordechai, Baruch Mordechai. Sometimes when you're a little tipsy, you have a little bit to drink and your inhibition is a little lower, you might not remember where they're up to in the song or where you're up to if you're reciting the pasuk. That was a direct quote from Shmuel. You can listen to it. Dr. Twersky, Rabbi Abraham's, his son, my dear friend, Dr. Benzin was on the call, and there was I brought on a coordinator in Hatzalah who for 30 years to ask him and to share with our parents what the real deal on the ground is in terms of, how many kids are being brought in like in really bad shape. So that's really something I would encourage all of you to listen to. I'll try to get that link to you. So let's start with the questions, please. What I would encourage you to do is raise a digital hand, or if many of you have blocked your faces, which is fine, either unblock and wave your hand, or there should be on your platform there should be a place to wave a digital hand. As soon as I see a wave, I'll unmute you, and you can go and ask a question. Okay, so if anyone has one, go ahead. If not, I'll go to some of the questions that we had earlier in the day. Anyone, folks?
I don't see a digital hand.
Okay, well, obviously you're talking. So if you can unmute, I'll tell you what, we don't have that. We have about 25, 30 people. Our group is not that large. Let's ask everybody to please mute yourself to see that you're muted. I'll try this. What I'm going to try to do is to allow you to unmute. I'm just changing the setting now. So everyone's muted, but you can unmute yourself. So let's just do this one at a time. And if you see two people are on, just come back later again, or unblock start your video just for a second, wave your hand. If you don't want to be seen, you can close it right afterwards. Okay, go ahead, please. Anybody? I heard somebody ask something. Somebody try just unmuting yourself to see if you can do that, just to make sure that you have access. Ariel, you can't unmute yourself? Okay, 1 second, please. Allow participants to unmute themselves. Okay, let's try that. How about now? Anybody? Okay, so we're going to go all in. I'm going to unmute everybody. So please either keep the sound down or just a moment. Okay, either turn the sound down or kindly everybody mute yourself until it's time to talk. How about now? Can we get in now? Why is it not working? Just a moment.
Oh, yeah.
I unmuted you.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so why don't you, I don't see why it's not working. 1 second. Ask to unmute. I'll allow participants to unmute. Okay, let's try that now. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, it works.
I just changed another setting. Okay, great. So everybody mute yourself. Let's do this one at a time. And go ahead. Anybody, anything that's on your mind, folks?
Yeah, so I had a question. So my son is in 11th grade in yeshiva, and they are allowing them to, go back to yeshiva for the Purim Seudah.
Okay.
As opposed to, staying home. And he said that he needs to take a bottle of wine. So first of all, would you recommend, what are your thoughts about not being with the family, going to yeshiva for the Purim Seudah and taking a bottle of wine?
Okay, so that's two separate questions. So first of all, if assuming that if your son says, I want to stay home, I don't think that's a problem. If your son says, I want to go, the kids should be with their friends. It's a lot more fun there and more enjoyable. And hopefully I'm not hopefully, I'm sure it's most, it's a different level of spirituality and shared Yom Tov. So I certainly think that you shouldn't stop him from going, even if you're not happy with what's going on. And let's be honest, it's impossible to have a school where all the parents agree with all the policies of the school. So, if your son is going to a school that you're not happy with what's going on there and you think that there's too much drinking and all of that, it's a very tough sell to say, don't go. So I would definitely encourage you to have a conversation. And if he says to bring a bottle of wine, I like that, wine and not whiskey. I think you should send him with a bottle of wine. If that's what his friends are doing, if that's what the school's policy is, or even if that's culturally where the kids are, I would encourage you to send him with it. I was going to mention this later, but it's going to come up a few times anyway. One of the things that I've been encouraging parents to do, I wrote a Times of Israel article 2 years ago about it, and actually made a short video. It's about a 2-minute video. All of my videos are on my YouTube page. It's Yakov Horowitz. So if you Google Yakov Horowitz on YouTube and you do no questions asked Purim pickup, so that's something that I really encourage parents to do. And that is, after you're finished telling your children what they should or shouldn't do, before they head out, I think it's extraordinarily important that you tell them, look, you know what we want you to do, you know what we don't want you to do. However, if you're out there and you didn't listen to us and you got drunk, you can call us and we will pick you up without saying a word. We will not talk about it for 48 hours. Okay, we'll talk about it sometime because it's dangerous, but we're not going to come and give you a speech. We won't say, I told you so. We won't say, why didn't you listen to me? Why am I telling you this? Because so often children, it's the way of the world that children don't always listen to parents. Adam Harishon was the first person in this world. His father, Hashem, told him instructions. He didn't listen either. It's just that's the way of the world. Hashem didn't create us. We're not angels. So, and your adolescent kids certainly aren't angels. So if they don't listen to you, what happens is they're out there with their friends. I mean, just, think about this. Maybe you don't want to think about it because it'll get some anxiety, but think about it in a very practical way. They're out with their friends. They didn't listen to you. They violated your orders. And now what? They're terrified of telling you or calling you and saying, Mom, Dad, I'm drunk, or pick me up. So what are the choices then? So either they'll sleep on somebody's yard or they'll be driven home by someone who's under the influence. Hopefully you'll have a parent there that can take them home. But if not, you're really putting their lives in danger by not giving them access to you. One of the ways that I explain it is that your life is more important than our rules. And again, don't tell them we're not going to talk about it, because I think you should talk about it, but assure them you won't have that conversation. Let's say I picked 48 hours. You could say a day, you could say a week, whatever. But we're going to have a conversation, but not right then. And I'm not going to say, I told you and you didn't listen to me. Okay, I hope I answered your question. Anybody else? Please, I think you're all able to unmute, so feel free. I have a few chat questions. I'll take those when we have some time. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so I have a question. I have also an 11th grade son. We and her have an open relationship, and he's a rule follower. It's going to come to the point where he's going to ask. What do you say?
My mother didn't have that for a child. Go ahead, please. Well, she has one, not my brother, not me.
We're just talking about one of them right now. Okay, right. This guy. So it's definitely going to get to the point where he's gonna ask me for permission, and it's going to be hard for me not to be able to allow it with a full heart, because I have my concerns and I am worried about it. Is it a problem to be giving me permission? Given my reservations, with him knowing that I'm not really a fan of it, and not making him feel guilty about the permission that I'm giving him?
Okay, that's a fantastic question. So again, like I said at the beginning, all of this is a personal choice, and all of this really depends on so many variables, one of which you said, that he's a rule follower, so he's not likely to. One of the other questions I encourage you to think about is, what's it going to cost you? What's that no going to cost you? Let's assume for a moment that he listens. And let's assume for a moment that he goes to a Purim party and 20 out of 23 kids in his class are drinking and having a great time. And what's that going to cost you? Is he going to be resentful? Is he going to be resentful and say, mommy, Ima, whatever, you really messed up my Purim. And if that's going to cost you, that might be a high price to pay. And you might not have the likelihood of you not having a rule follower later on starts to grow when, you start telling them no's about things that they really would like to do. So I think a good idea would be to ask your son, well, how would you feel if I said no? Would you feel, and give him the choices, would you feel that I limited your Purim enjoyment and messed up your Purim for you? Or would you say, okay, look, that's not how we do things in our family. So ask the question. And say, I want you to be completely honest with me. And then you kind of wing it according to feedback is getting. Age is important, friends are important. What percentage of the class? There are many shuls that made a decision years ago to go dry, to completely not have any alcohol under any circumstances. I think one of the big shuls that did it at the beginning was Young Israel Woodmere with 1,100 families. And Tavi Alei and Bracha, God bless them, the rabbis decided that there's too much danger in drinking, and they just have dry events. And a lot of yeshivas are going to dry events. So if they do that, again, it's the culture. So if you're living in a neighborhood like that, and then the kids are less likely to be upset if you limit their alcohol consumption or not let them drink at all. So again, listen more than you talk, and hopefully you can collaboratively come up with something. And
thank you. That was very helpful.
Okay,
very
great.
helpful.
I want to tell you, ironically, speaking of Megillah, speaking of this is the season, the Gemara says that many Nevi'im and Nevi'as, prophets and male prophets and female prophets, were prophesizing that the Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, were sinning and they're going to get into trouble, and chas v'shalom, there'll be punishments for it. And Gemara says that when Achashverosh took off his ring and gave it to Haman, everybody started fasting. So the Gemara says the Nesinas HaTabas, giving that ring, was more of a motivator for the Bnei Yisrael to take this seriously and daven than all the Nevi'im and the Nevi'os. So ironically, and I'm not encouraging you to hope this happens, but sometimes the kids just need to learn themselves. And sometimes kids get cured from drinking if either one of their friends gets roaring drunk, or especially they do, and they throw up and they have a hangover for 2 days. Sometimes that might be your best friend. So to some extent, that's what Hashem gave us free choice. So we should be able to learn from our mistakes. So I would just finish as a final point. Sometimes they just have to go through this themselves. They may not like wine, the whiskey. They may, it tastes horrible. It makes me feel sick. I feel like, so they might love it. So that's and the beauty of this is you say, look, do it, use your judgment, please come home and talk about it. One way or the other, and I won't criticize. So that's a great way to have them come home and evaluate how it goes. Okay, anybody else? I hope I answered your question. Anybody else, folks?
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm one. I know nothing about alcohol. My husband knows nothing about. We really are an alcohol-free home. But I have a son who's asking permission to get what he calls just a little tipsy, and I don't really even know what that means and how I quantify. Like, I think I'd feel better saying, if I say, well, we'll let you have X. like in the house, like 2 glasses of wine. I don't even know how to answer this question. And I feel like the more I sound naive, it's worse off, because like you so are out of touch and you really have no clue what's going on. And, and it's hard enough to just hear how, our city is nerdy because we don't do what New York does or Lakewood does. So I'm just struggling with like, I don't even know how to answer that question. Like, he's never drank before in his life. So to me, like, I can get tipsy from bar to Nura. I don't know. I just don't know.
you notice all the New Yorkers are laughing and having a good time. And I think they want to move to your neighborhood. I just want to tell you that. Some of the folks here would like to, I'm sorry?
Nothing, I was laughing.
Yeah, so certainly you can, if you're comfortable bringing some, whatever they want to drink at home, like I said, and have them experiment at home, it's fine. They'll figure it out. When you say a little tipsy, you really can't quantify this. You can't say you take 1 drink or this and that. It's really hard to quantify, and doing it on the fly. There's certainly, I don't think that the average teenager is going to take a little measuring cup and do this in front of his friends if he doesn't want to get laughed out of town. But here's a really good idea, a suggestion. Why don't you sit down with him and go over a blood alcohol chart? How does that sound? Who was the one? What's your name? Who asked the question? I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
Shoshana.
Oh, Shoshana, how are you? I can tell you some kids on the block who can tell you. Send your husband, send Harry my place. Yeah, so I think, in other words, perhaps be honest. Always be yourself. Be honest.
But myself, right, but my honesty and
okay, say I'm a geek, I never drank. No, but be honest.
No, it's not even, it is. And I'm a geek, but we also have brothers-in-law who went through alcohol addiction and are recovered. So we are coming at it from a much more, I don't want to say out of fear, but out of really reality of what we've seen. And it scares me more than maybe a normal person. Oh, it's just Purim. Like, I really am worried about the effect of, are they predisposed? Am I awakening a taste or a tom for something that he never had before? And the more I want to push it off, like, he is a rule follower. He's a great kid. And to be honest, I wonder if he's asking me to see what I'm going to say versus actually doing more, because I think he's sort of figuring out, like, is mommy going to be crazy about this? And, or she really...
So the best thing is certainly not to get crazy about it.
Correct. I'm trying.
And maybe sit down, go online and look up a blood alcohol chart, explain how the numbers work, whatever his name is. How do you think that the police determine if somebody's drunk?
Right.
How do you think that? So they have a blood alcohol test, they breathe into something, they have a breathalyzer. Explain it to them. If you don't know, something, it's great if you'd explore this together with him. Sit down, let him sit down next to you. Say, let's do some research. Look, I don't know. Let's do some research. I'm very glad you're asking me, and it's responsible. I'm very pleased, and it's responsible. And I want you to do this with anything that you don't know. And if I don't know, great, we'll look it up together. Sit down with him, look it up, and look up a blood alcohol chart, what a breathalyzer is, how they use it, and there's a chart there. It says, if you take 2 ounces of alcohol inside, if you weigh, it has to do with your weight, and it has to do with the amount of time that you drink, and if you've eaten something beforehand. Again, so all of these, this educational process, first of all, will be good for you. You got other kids coming. I hope they're all, rule followers. But it's a good education for you to understand what's going on, and you just go through it together. And then you'll sit down and say, look, you see what it says here. Till here, you'll get tipsy is this. I bet you, Shoshana, there's a chart there that says, this you'll get tipsy. Here you shouldn't be driving anymore. And here you're going to pass out.
Thank you.
And it might be, thank you, Shoshana. It might be helpful for you to say that the reason when the Chachamim said that, you should drink a little bit, and show the chart, they didn't mean that. They meant this. That's what Rav Shmuel said, and explain that physiologically, your inhibitions get lowered a little bit. And if you're tense, or if it's more likely that he'll say, I love you to his mother if he had half a drink already. Why? Because he might not be comfortable saying so. So in other words, that their relationship with Hashem, and when they're davening and celebrating, so a little bit of alcohol could allow you to get to a more spiritual place where you leave some of the stuff behind and get into a spiritual experience. I've had the schus of seeing great tzaddikim that have done things like this, and so that would be another discussion of where the blood alcohol goes. Have him weigh himself, talk about it. I think it'd be really good. And if you mentioned you have relatives, why don't you ask him to call one of them up?
Oh, they're very vocal. That's why, he even came to me and said, he's like, I know what you're going to, he's like, first he said, what do you think about drinking? So I started to laugh. I said, Yakov, you know what I think about drinking. Why don't we rephrase what you're actually asking me so we can have an open and honest conversation? It went really well, and I'm really proud that he came to, he's not home. He's calling because he is coming home, and we're trying to just preempt and be ready on my side and his side. Just, it's new for me. It's just new because his older brother was never a drinker at all. So,
and just Shoshana, one of the things that I've been trying to use my public voice to amplify the voices of the parents and children and spouses and siblings of people who have alcohol problems or people who are in recovery. In the general population, it's 1 out of 12. 1 out of 12 people have a drinking problem. That means if you're in a shul with 100 people, you have more than a few who are really struggling with addiction or in recovery. And I think sensitizing your son to this, saying, look, whoever, Uncle so-and-so has a drink, ask him what it's like when he's in public and people try to shove drinks at him. So that's another sensitivity that I'm trying to, I just spoke to them just an hour ago. A mother of a kid who's in recovery, spoke to me, and we talk often about this, and she keeps saying, just tell everyone what it's like to wait home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and with not in communication with your child, waiting for that call and hoping that it's not, God forbid, the police, that something, that your child died. Or that they're picked up. Imagine what that's like. Imagine what it's like to the family of someone who's in recovery, who's been in sobriety, who's been clean for 7 months, and what it took from that addict, from the person in recovery, and how the parents supported them, all the tears and the prayers that people went through to get him to this stage. And imagine somebody goes and hands him, sticks a drink in front of him, or her. How bad that would be. So that's another part, Shoshana. If you're looking to raise a mensch, that's also part of the discussion. And that would be a good thing to talk to your relative about. What was it like when you had alcohol? Were you able to turn it down? What would you have wished other people did? All of this is part of the process of getting a mensch. And one last thing to all of you, if you look at the research, I encourage you to have a look yourself. One of the things during COVID, it struck me when I saw the first survey, during COVID, there was a much greater spike in drinking among women than men. And all of you moms out there who've been trying to get your kids on Zoom lessons and having your children 24/7 with no childcare know exactly why. I believe that that's the reason. With the study, you never know why it's like that, but I suspect that that's a good part of it. So again, all of this is part of the growth process of them getting introduced. And you can think of it in a more less frightening way. How would you introduce them to driving? Think about that. How would you introduce them to driving? What conversations would you have? What would you want them to be educated about? All of this helps, and that's why I encourage you to have open conversation with your children. Let me just take a couple of chats. Can you discuss the difference between teen drinking in Eretz Yisrael and America? It seems that it's more acceptable in Israel than America. It probably is so. They drink younger, and so it's a problem. It's a real problem. You wind up getting into it's a problem. I don't know what to tell you. I find the notion of adults drinking in front of their students to be, I don't want to say any harsh words because there are some very good people who do it. I'm just, it doesn't mean if they make one mistake or one terrible mistake that they're terrible people. But I just can't even understand, especially today, knowing what we know. 30 years ago, everybody thought that Jewish people don't get drunk. Now we know what the deal is. You might want to make a decision whether you should send your children to yeshiva like that in the first place. But if they're there, you can talk to them and hope that they'll learn lessons, and maybe it will take them being in a position where they'll be as horrified as I am or you are, and maybe that will change. Jonathan, Megillah says, yes, supposed to get drunk until Arham Baruch Mordechai. Right, so Jonathan, you can unmute yourself. Are you asking why, how could I say that Shmuel Kamenetsky said that person shouldn't get drunk if it says that? Is that correct? Jonathan, was that your question? You can text or so the Gemara, and you mentioned, the Gemara mentions that Rabbi Rav Zera had
right.
That one.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Jonathan, are you on?
Yeah, I couldn't get myself unmuted there for a second.
Right, please.
Yeah, I just brought that up. You may have covered this earlier because I got in here late. But I just went through a session with Rabbi David Fink a couple of days ago from the Web Yeshiva, and this is one of the things that he brought up, that the following statement in the from Megillah, after the statement about Mordechai and Haman, is used by many to say, don't really drink and get yourself drunk.
And Shmuel Kamenetsky mentioned it when he was speaking. He said the Shoftei L'Rab Zera. He said it with the Lithuanian accent, which is that L'Rab Zera. You can hear, if you listen to the recording, Rav Shmuel mentions that some people say, you see that you're supposed to get that drunk. So he says, if you see that this came about, this one person killed another because they were drunk, how could you suggest that the Torah should? Right. So thank you, Jonathan. That is correct. I thought you were saying the other way. I thought you were going to ask me, how could you say this if you see that the Gemara says you're supposed to get drunk? So the Baruch,
No.
I gave an explanation for an alternative view on what Ar-Rahman and Baruch Mordechai is. Parenthetically, let me just tell you another Torah thought on this, and it really does relate to what we spoke about earlier. One of the moms, maybe it was you, Shoshana, or I think it was a mother before you, who was asking about, how to explain alcohol drinking to children. One of a beautiful interpretation that I heard, again, that if I'm talking too fast, let me back it up a little bit. The question was about the text that the Gemara that we say, Chayiv inish l'besumei, a person should get drunk until he cannot tell the difference. Ad lo yada, he doesn't know between Haman should be cursed and Mordechai should be blessed. Baruch Mordechai. So one of the beautiful interpretations, I had the schus to hear this from my Rabbi in high school at a point where I was not a rule follower, and we asked our Rabbi, who was a Talmud, Shimon Shkop, and just a tremendous Talmud Chacham. I'm sorry, it was a Zelagestein actually, and he was teaching in Torah Avodas before he started his own yeshiva, and he came in serious, serious, and in the mood of Yantif, but he came in like it was Shavuos. Let's put it that way, not like it was, and. We asked him, we pressed him on it. Said, Rebbe, chad lo yada. So he brushed it off, and then he said that his Rebbe told him, I don't know who he was referring to. Maybe I wouldn't have remembered if he said it at the time. But he said that his Rebbe said like this, that when we say Arur Haman, when you're upset about someone and either should be cursed or when you're angry at someone, it's much easier to be completely angry. You can get up to 100% anger very well. But when it comes to praising someone else, sometimes you have a hard time getting above 70. Okay, nice guy, but they're also a little bit of that. If someone cuts you off in traffic, you'll say they're whatever, and you'll mean it 100%. Someone does you a favor, you say he's nice, but I don't like what he did last year. When you have a little drink, Rebbe told us that was the pshat, that when you have a little drink, Ad lo yada, you say people cannot distinguish between that you say Baruch Mordechai that you bless another person, you bless another Jew 100% the same way that you curse someone you're angry at. So that's what Rebbe said, that you should have just enough alcohol. Shoshana, I'm sure that would be pretty low on the BAC chart, the blood alcohol. So just enough so that you can fully come to appreciate other people with a little bit of alcohol in you. Okay, folks, next. I hope I answered your question. Eitan, go ahead.
It's a beautiful shot. I know that from at least our kids that the one mitzvah to machmir on is not finding alternative explanations towards Adlo Yada.
I hope that was a good one.
But I think our question is related to, yes, we can have these conversations as often as possible with our sons, and daughters for that matter. But what happens when they go out, like, in the social scene? It seems to be that the way they act inside the house or the way that they would try to interact with us is very personable and personal. But once they're in the social atmosphere, things change a lot. And then coming to Purim, there's many, many houses that people go to and shul parties where it's not just acceptable to drink, but sometimes it's being pushed on by the adults. And even through COVID, there's, they're already expecting. They already have their little lists of places that they plan on going, and they know it's accessible. Like, how do we have that conversation with our kids? Number one, and what do we do as a community? Like, not Masira shouldn't be part of the conversation, but when we know that this is happening, we know that they're going specifically to these specific houses. What do we do as parents to try to minimize it?
Fantastic question. Thank you, Eitan. So one of the things, I'm a real believer in education, and that it's a process. When Dr. Tversky, Dr. Mitzian Tversky, and I and other activists started talking about Purim drinking 25 years ago, nobody thought we had an alcohol problem in the community. First, an individual who was addicted or had a loved one knew about it, but there wasn't, we weren't talking about these things in polite company. And people literally looked at us like we lost our minds. It was a very tough sell, and it wasn't a very pleasant thing to get out there, but we just kept at it. And it changes when you get, it's not something that you can really do Erev Purim. This is something that you talk about during the summer, or you get a few people together, bring in someone who deals who in the emergency room in the hospital. When I did that talk with Rav Shmuel Shlita, Shmuel Kamenetsky, I had on the head the dispatcher in Hatzalah in Borough Park, and he was telling hair-raising stories about kids coming in toxic shock, kids coming in dead, and so if you want to pull together a meeting with your Rav, again, this is just not the time for it. So ask me why I'm speaking about it now. I still believe in education, that you won't get their attention during the summer, but pull together a meeting of different people, an ER person, a drug counselor, someone who helps people in recovery, someone an addict themselves, and the Rav and a few other people, and talk about it without coming in and being strident about it. So I do believe it's an education process. And I think we should try to do this. It's something that you should try to do. For the moment, you speak to your children, understanding that they're going out there. And I don't know what you want earlier. I was speaking about giving your kids an option of calling you. Were you here?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's something you tell them. Look, we want you to listen. We don't want you doing. We don't want you. You know what we want you and don't want you to do. You're a teenager, you might choose to do otherwise. If you do, pick up a phone and we'll pick you up without any questions asked. So you know that they're at least safe. In the literature, they call it scaffolding. Like, scaffold, you're doing some construction, you're fixing the windows on a high-rise building, you want to have something behind you. So the concept of scaffolding means that it's used in many different ways, but one of the ways to think about it is that you're allowing your son to go to this party where you're not happy about, tell him you're not happy about it. Scaffolding means, but he's going to have to experience it and he's going to have to figure it out for himself. So scaffolding means that you have some protection while that's going on. So in other words, let's say you and your friends get together and on alternating years or whatever it is, alternating hours, one of you stays in the parking lot. Okay, let's say you have let's say you have 10 friends that we all worried the same thing. Call each other, do a WhatsApp chat, and you say, look, we want the kids to have some supervision. If you go into the party, the kids are going to get annoyed at you. So we're staying in the parking lot. If there's a problem, come out to us. So that's a way to do this where you're providing some scaffolding for all of you parents who are correctly nervous about what's going on in the next 48 hours or so. Try to think about it in terms of scaffolding. What can you do to make it a little bit safer? So telling them that they can pick you up, that you'll pick them up without a question, is scaffolding. You're having somebody, I think a parking lot is like a good idea, or outside the house. Okay, if we have a few minutes and no one asks questions, I'll tell you a story about one of our children that she gave me permission to relate, very much related to the scaffolding thing. Anybody else, folks? Did I answer, Eitan, did I answer your question?
So far, so good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If it becomes no good, just let me know. Anybody else, folks?
Just a quick question. Firstly, thank you very much for your time and for doing this.
Sure,
it's most informative.
Is that Jonas? Are you?
It's Yona or Jonas.
Yona. Okay. Hi, Yona.
The premise of what we're talking about here, obviously, I guess every state is different, but we're talking about kids where it's not legal for them to be doing what they're doing, right? So how do we sort of speak to a child to explain to them that we're quote unquote breaking the law for Purim, but when they want to understand why, let's say, and again, for the people that are from New York that had a hard time understanding the drinking, they'll definitely have a hard time understanding that the vaping and the marijuana and the stuff that's pretty prevalent in most yeshivas nowadays. How do you sort of explain to them that drinking on Purim is okay? And then when it comes to other kind of sort of breaking the laws, even where everyone's doing it or where it's not harmful, it's whatever the argument may be, it's hard to explain to a kid in that scenario. And I guess, sorry, I'll let you speak, but I guess this question is not really for Purim in that sense where you mentioned, the next 48 hours, Shalom Zachars and get-togethers and camps and all these things, I think really hold almost as much, not as much, but almost as much kind of for teens in this generation, that kind of, I guess, risk where there's always going to be kids that are doing it, and they have to obviously be the ones that know what the expectations and have the open relationship, as you mentioned. Not related to that question, but just a second question is, and I think Eitan mentioned before, where the kids know where they're going. How or what's the response to a balabasa, a mother or father who has either their kid with whatever arrangements their kid may have with them, which is their own personal rules, but when they bring friends into their house or where there's collectors coming in, does anybody ever have the right to give someone underage alcohol?
Right. So, let's try to unpack all of that.
Sorry, yeah.
Then we're related to the laws, and I'll start even with the more mild case, a mild situation, a permutation of that question. Let's say a parent knows that his kid's going out to Shalom's office and drinking because that's where the alcohol is, and the kid's underage. Should the parent bring beer into the house knowing that the kid's really underage and telling the kid really break the law at home, right? It's thorny. It's not simple. It's really not simple. It's not simple. I think, it's complicated. It's really, I don't have all the answers. That's a tough one. It's really a tough question, especially in that way. If you go by what I said at the beginning, and I think it's better that they drink in front of you if they, rather than they just run around the neighborhood. Really, essentially, you're winking at underage drinking. So, I know places where the workarounds where they tell the bartenders to card the kids. There are balei simcha who make a simcha. God bless them. That's what they should do if they're having an open bar. is tell the guy or woman behind the caterer, the people behind the counter, I want you to card the kids, card everybody, card the people. I know people who've reported that there's underage drinking going on when they were upset that, you can have your feelings one way or the other. But it really is complicated. It's complicated and it's thorny, and I do not have a simple answer to it.
Right, and I appreciate it. I understand that, but I guess sort of the question is the conversation with a child, this is Purim, this is special, this is a Simcha, this is a Yom Tov, so this is what the rules are going to be, but when it comes to the next time the conversation maybe comes up, that all falls out the window.
Yeah, but right, so that's the tough part of it.
Right.
The other way would be to have a holistic discussion about the fact that you happen to be living here where there is alcohol available, where people aren't following, not everybody's following the rules about giving alcohol to minors. And as a defensive mechanism, because I love you and I'm worried for your life, that you should go out drinking late at night in other people's homes, I'm gonna do what I have to do to keep you safe. So
Right.
Rather than talk about Purim as an exception, it's a tough exception. If you're saying that it's okay on Purim, it's very hard to say it's okay some other time. It's rather, I'm holding my nose and I'm doing this because I'm worried about your life. So again, I don't have a simple answer. It's complicated.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No
Sorry.
problem.
It is complicated. Anybody else, folks? I'm going to wrap up in a few minutes. Anybody else?
Rabbi Horowitz, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Hi, this is Scott. Scott, it's very wonderful to see you.
Hey, conundrum. Hi, Scott.
Nice to see you.
I look forward to getting back on your program.
Sounds good. I look forward
Those
to
who
that.
don't know, Scott has Rabbi Scott has an Orthodox conundrum, has a great podcast about, he brings in folks from all walks of life, even some rabbi type from Muncie. Talk about various issues. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question about, I came in a little late, so it could be you already dealt with this, so I apologize if so. I used to run a yeshiva here in Eretz Yisrael for post-high school kids who come from the United States, boys from yeshiva high schools. And I'm stuck now between this feeling of hypocrisy a little bit, because I'm talking about myself, because now that I no longer run it, I can speak about how, I think it's really bad. These kids get completely plastered. It's terrible. And I really believe that. At the same time, if I were to go back and put myself into my shoes 6 years ago when I was running the yeshiva, if someone had said to me, this is dangerous, I don't know what I would have said, but I know what I would have thought. It would have been, are you kidding me? Purim is the highlight of the year for some of these guys. It turns some of them around. It's the big moment. And part and parcel of that is when they get completely wasted. I'm not justifying it, but if I were to stop doing that, I could close the doors of my yeshiva. It's almost that big. What would you recommend? And on some level, it's not really fair for me to ask because it's not my problem anymore, but I'm wondering what you would say to someone who, they tell you, hey, I'd love to stop the drinking, but it's just not going to happen in my yeshiva. And even trying to limit it is kind of a futile gesture. What would you say to something like that? That's my question.
The question of Scott, what should you talk about it now when you didn't do it before? Is that your question? Or is the question, what should heads of school do?
Primarily, I'm talking about what should heads of school do. What I should do now is I'm sort of just acknowledging that I'm a bit of a hypocrite because, and I'm very open about that it's easy for me now to say that no big deal, but so I'm just sort of like, but really I'm curious what a yeshiva head should do. That's what I'm more interested in.
I think when it's culturally, when things are in that state of play, the only real, pragmatically, I think the only real cultural change happens when a bunch of schools get together. And we say, look, this is pikuach nefesh. We can't keep sacrificing our children. One example, I was a camp director in the Catskills. I started, oh my goodness. Now, Abe Lincoln, there was a president. In 1982, I took a job as a camp director and a head counselor, and I had 30 staff members that were my age, basically, but I was terrified about the driving. And everybody, driving in the Catskills on dark mountain roads that the kids didn't know. so we actually got together. A number of yeshiva camps got together. We went to the Gedolim together with Hatzalah people. I think I was talking to Yona or someone else about doing this with a group of people, getting a group of people around this and having a meeting. And we sat down with the Rosh Yeshiva, not during the summer, but a real holistic group. Someone who lost a kid, Nebuch, on the road, and the cat, and other, Hatzalah people, people who are running summer camps, who are expressing their fear, and they, believe it or not, the Gedolim came up with a ruling in America that no one drives under the age of 21. And probably 30 summer camps adopted it that year. And that was a big deal because the kids could, Muncie, you can drive already at 16. And in New York City, you can drive it at 18. So you were telling kids who were driving all year long, in the contracts, in the staff contracts, it said you have to drop your license at the door. Yeah, I'm sorry, you had to deposit it with the head counselor. So that was a big cultural change. And never, there were many deaths that brought it to that. So I think that if you're asking what to do, I wouldn't talk about it publicly if I were you. If any kid's going to say, haha, what did you do?
Right.
But I think if you're looking to change things culturally, I think that's the way it goes. It just goes, it has to be something that's done together.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Folks, I really hope you found this helpful. I've been considering doing an open Q&A on parenting, say once a week or so. After, whatever. If any of you are interested in doing things like this more often, drop me an email or let me know. And I would really consider doing this and pick a topic a week. We could give some readings beforehand. It's something that I've been thinking about doing. So I'm definitely open to the idea. You can go on my social media, Facebook at Yakov Horowitz, Twitter at Yakov Horowitz, all of it, at Yakov, Facebook and Instagram. If you would like, just drop a note. I participated here. I'd like to do, a weekly, nobody's obligated, come when you like, have a set time. I've been thinking about doing this for a long time because people call me and it's impossible for me to respond to everyone who does this, which is how I got the idea for this. If this is something that any of you are interested in, please go on one of my social media platforms and just write a note that you'd be interested in exploring the possibility of doing this, let's say once a week or once every 2 weeks. And I really would be open to the idea of doing it. Okay, folks, I hope you found it helpful. Everybody have a wonderful, meaningful, and safe Purim. And all of you have
promise us a story.
A process story. But I said if we have time. I have an appointment at 3 o'clock. If we do the thing, I'll do that the first. If we do the weekly, that'll be first. Okay.
Rabbi Horowitz, what's the best way I should just leave a comment on your social media?
Just leave a comment on the social media and we'll collect them. Yeah. Or write to the others. We had this thing. Here's the video. Post it to your friends or to the other people on that thread and say, would you be interested in doing this once a week about real issues of the day? We pick an issue. I'll send some readings out and we get a chance to really jam, to really talk.
Where's the recording going to be posted? Where's the recording?
I'm sorry. I'm going to be putting it on my social media and on my YouTube channel. Everything goes on my YouTube channel. It's at Yakov Horowitz. Got to go, folks. Be well, everybody. Have a freilich Purim.
Thank you so much.
My greatest pleasure. Be well.